2 Samuel 4:4. And it reads, "And Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son that was lame of his feet. He was 5 years old when the tidings came of Saul and Jonathan out of Jezreel, and his nurse took him up and fled. And it came to pass, as she made haste to flee, that he fell and became lame. And his name was Mephibosheth." That was the King James. Now I'll read it to you from the Message. "It so happened that Saul's son Jonathan had a son who was maimed in both feet. When he was 5 years old, the report of Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. His nurse picked him up and ran, but in her hurry to get away, she fell, and the boy was maimed. His name was Mephibosheth." I would like to, in the next brief moments, leave the thought with you: mishandled, but not abandoned. Amen. Mishandled, but not abandoned. Jonathan, the son of Saul, had a son who was crippled from his waist down. He was 5 years old when the news came out of Jezreel, meaning the valley of deaths, of Saul and Jonathan's death from the battlefield. As a result of the death of Saul and Jonathan, the boy's nurse took him up and fled. In her haste to escape, he fell and became lame. This young boy I'm talking about here is named Mephibosheth. Son of Saul, Jonathan, having gone into battle with his father against the Philistines at Mount Gibeah by the Jezreel Valley, left his son in the able care of a nurse, or what we call in these times a nanny. As the battle got fierce, Jonathan was killed, and Saul, hearing of this, pleaded with his armor-bearer to take his life also. In the early centuries before Christ, BC, it was customary that when a ruler was defeated, his family and descendants be killed as well, so that there would be no lineage of any kind after the ruler left to reclaim the throne. Now the news of the sorrowful death of both Jonathan and his father Saul caused great fear in the late king's house. In the rush of the moment, everyone tried to gather as much as they could and run to safety. And it happened that as Jonathan's nanny took him to flee, she lost grip of him. He fell and became lame. His name, Mephibosheth. She dropped him. His legs got affected. He got broken, perhaps even his spine. She dropped him. At that moment, the little boy's trust, she dropped. At the tender age of 5, not strong enough to flee from the world's pressures, he was dropped. Dropped by that one person his life was entrusted with for security and support. In that split moment, his life had a turnaround. His life got shattered. A limitation had been placed on his life, as innocent as he was. He lost something very dear to him: his ability to walk, his ability to play around like the other kids, his ability to be normal like everyone else. He was mishandled. We all have stories to tell. Let me take this moment to ask you, and you may ponder quietly, who mishandles you? Growing up, we had people watching us from one point in time, holding us up in the stead of our parents. They bathed us, fed us, clothed us. They supported our parents in many ways. Let me ask, who has mishandled you? How do you handle it when the teacher tells you you'll never amount to anything? How does a son handle seeing his father hit his mother but never embrace her? That moment when no one was looking, when no one was paying attention, did they do something to you that affects you even till today? Did you feel dropped by their actions or inactions? The person your parents trusted you with, that older brother, that grandmother, that uncle, that housemate, that friend who comes visiting very often, did they mishandle you? Let's look at a few biblical references of great men who got mishandled at different instances in their walk or journey. Many years later, after this tragic incident had occurred, a new king had been enthroned in the person of David. Yeah, David, the mentee of King Saul, the shepherd boy. David had been King Saul as his mentor, as his boss, as the person he looked up to at one point in his life, felt mishandled. Yes, even King Saul, his mentor, dropped him. In his youthful age, with his pure heart and innocence, he served his king, his boss, his manager, his direct senior. But as hours and days went by, King Saul's heart grew with hatred for him. David, not knowing what wrong he had done towards the king, fled for his life. For his master was king and intent on killing him. His master had mishandled him. Feeling dejected and confused, he fled to seek refuge and solace in a far land. Now let me ask you, even in your place of business, in your workplace, on the job, who has mishandled you? Was it that boss you thought was your mentor? You looked up to him or her so much, thought they would defend you in times needed, but they left you to be scorched out alone? Like a leaf without branches and roots. Is it your direct boss? Is it your business partner? Is it your confidant? Who has mishandled you? Esau, being dropped by his brother Jacob, was filled with so much pain and hatred. That one person he thought was his brother, his twin, out of deceit bestowed his rightful blessing. We all know that story. Jacob, as his name depicts, was a cunning young lad. By his action of trading food for his elder brother's birthright, as well as cunningly deceiving his blessing, left his brother in no better place than to feel mishandled. So dropped to the extent all his brother Esau could feel towards Jacob was pain and anger. But that was not the end. Jacob, some years later, had his fair share of being mishandled. People will say karma got him, he got paid back, he reaped what he sowed. What am I saying? Jacob's very uncle Laban cunningly married a different woman to him after 7 years of laboring hardly. Only on the morning after his marriage did Jacob realize he had been mishandled. Permit me to once again ask you, who has mishandled you? Is it that person you love so much who had promised to marry you but left you hanging before you could do anything? Is it that nice lady that you had so much hope for but ditched you in the long run? Remember when they promised they were going to stay no matter what? Remember when they gave you their word to keep you happy always. But what happened in the end? Is it that family member or friend who promised to help you but never did because they demanded sex and you didn't give in? Is it that boss who spoke good of you and praised you before others in your presence, but spoke evil intent behind your back. Sorry for reminding you about these incidents, these past hurts and pain, but let's deal with who has mishandled you. Mephibosheth, which means out of the mouth of shame in the Hebrew context, was taken to a place called Lodabar, which also means land of nothing, by his name. Mephibosheth had been reduced to nothing. He had been crippled as a result of being mishandled. He had lost his heritage, and not only that, his destiny. If there's one thing I know, it's this: being mishandled has repercussions. It lowers one's self-esteem and rids one of their sense of value. But you may have heard this before: broken crayons still draw straight lines. It only depends on how you hold them. Notice Mephibosheth's response to King David after the promise to restore unto him what was rightfully his. Bowing to the ground, he, Mephibosheth, said, "What is your servant that you should look upon such a dead dog as I?" A dead dog. Was it that bad? His self and identity had been shattered. For him to call and see himself as a dead dog is almost heartbreaking. But just like him, there are many of us who see ourselves as this way or even lower. But this day, I bring you a lasting solution: respite. He was offered respite, but the pain of being dropped, the effect of being mishandled, had laid a heavy toll on him, such that any form of respite offered in the form of escape from his past hurt and shame was seen as a form of mockery. He rejected it with every fiber of his being, for it would cause a change in his comfort zone, a zone of pain and hurt which had become his new world. We sometimes become so used to our issues, we accept them and make it a part of us, our new identity, and it changes the trajectory of our thoughts and being as a whole. He received the news that both his father and grandfather had died. His home was shattered. He had no father to guide him, no grandfather to shower him with love and affection. Who would take care of him? Who would feed him? Who would clothe him? Who would put him to bed at night? Imagine how alone he must have felt. Imagine being so young, the pain and memory of his father and grandfather. Imagine the insecurity of no more home that he could call his own. Many of us today are suffering spiritually, wounded and made lame by those that hurt us. Hurt in church is the biggest excuse I hear for not serving God. In all probability, they were hurt by someone who really intended to help them, but something went wrong. The nurse, mind you, never intended to drop Mephibosheth. In fact, she saved his life, but in the same instance, he was made lame. But there is not a word about Mephibosheth becoming ill and bitter towards the nurse. Too many times we have excuses on why we won't live for God. Someone hurt our feelings. Someone did something to us or someone we love. The preacher said something that we didn't agree with. The praise team sang a song that we didn't like. Someone did this or that or the other. Your husband doesn't want to live for God or get up on Sunday morning, so you stay at home with him. Your wife got her feelings affected, so now it affects the whole family. You won't quit going to your job and punching that clock, because you can't stand half the people you work with, but you'll stop going to church because something was said that you didn't agree with. He can't walk for the rest of his life because of someone else. He has to have help to the bathroom. Someone has to work and provide for him. Someone has to clothe him and help him through life because he was dropped, hurt, and crippled. Imagine from his perspective, he can't jump up and run and play with the other kids. He can't play or run over the hills or be in the kingdom any longer because he is crippled. He is hurt. He was dropped. He is disabled. He has been mishandled. This day, as you hear this, just as King David remembered Mephibosheth and invited him back to the place of his heritage and glory, Jesus is calling you. He's invited you to his table. He has seen your pain and hurt. Your late night cries have reached him. He wants to offer you a solution. The silent cries of your heart have reached his ears. He wants to offer peace. His yoke which is lighter than what we carry. He knows you have been mishandled. He knows you have found a new comfort zone. Although unpleasant, he wants to restore to you what you have lost. For he says, come unto me all who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Lodabar is a ghetto town. It's a garbage dump for the bigger cities. We have often heard of depressed people that are depressed. We've often said they fell into Lodabar. Lodabar, there is no pastures for animals to graze on. It's barren. There's no economy there. So it was the worst of conditions for someone, especially a king's son, to be living in. I say to you today, stop blaming other people for your misfortune and blaming people for why you are where you want to be or where you thought you should be. You don't have the job you thought you deserved, or you thought you could have done better in picking a spouse. You've been mishandled, you got hurt, you got crippled, and I'm not making light of your pain and suffering, but stop punishing the preacher because another preacher dropped and hurt you and spiritually crippled you. If anyone has done that, the best thing you can do is to forgive them. Don't punish the church in your giving of your tithes and offering because another preacher ran off with your money. Or someone mishandled the funds. Don't punish your potential fiance or spouse because your ex was no good and they mishandled you, because they hurt you, because they crippled you when it came to relationships. You have to understand people are going to leave you. People are going to hurt you. People are going to walk away with you. If people decide to walk away from you, let them walk. Don't beg someone to love you. You don't beg someone to care about you. Don't beg someone to stay. Let them walk. Many might have been further in accomplishing their life's dreams and the fulfilling of their life with peace, power, and prosperity had it not been for those things that crippled them in their past. Not only in their body, but many of us are crippled in our mind. When a person has been broken by the neglect of another, the scars left behind on the inside far outweigh the scars that are left on the outside. Amen. The scars that are the most painful reminders are the ones that attach themselves to our minds. Many who have been afflicted by the demons of their past remain infected by the pain of abuses inflicted upon them in people that they trusted, and they're haunted and affected to this very day by something that happened decades ago. This is so because they are still struggling mentally and with the hurts of a pitiful past. The mind can be tormented by memories of having been battered and blistered by the burden of brokenness. God sent me to tell someone that he knows you have been hurt, but you have not been abandoned. I often say he won't bring you through a flood to let you drown in a puddle. Until you understand he will restore all that was rightfully yours, all that was wrongfully taken care away from you. He wants to restore you. He wants to restore the years that the locusts have eaten, even the cankerworm and the caterpillar. He wants to restore to you the peace that the years have stolen from you. We often hear the saying, hurt people. But I'm here to tell you, hurt people can help people. This is what he says. No matter how hard and far you've been dropped, he will catch you. Crooked and broken crayons still color. I think about my mother. My mother's mother died when she was a toddler. And yet my mother had no example of what a mother could be, but my mother is one of the best people in the world at what she does. I heard a story once of two sons of a father that died an alcoholic. And one said, yeah, I'm an alcoholic. And the other one said, I've never touched alcohol in my life. And when they asked each of them why, they both said, look at how my father was. Just take a step towards Jesus. He has been waiting. He is still waiting. Run into his open arms and experience a new life, a new joy, a new peace. Mephibosheth came to the king, broken, but he came to the king. Battered, but he came to the king. Hurt, but yet he still came to the king. When he came to the king made him a permanent member of the king's court. Restoration came to him. Renewal came to him. Revival came to him. Somebody said, well, he was crippled. How could he have made it to the king? Yes, his feet were broken, but his knees worked just fine. And he kneeled over to where the king was. He got down on his knees, and that's how he made it. I would encourage you that that's how we're going to make it, getting down on our knees and taking all our troubles, problems, and hurts to the king. That tells me if I've been battered, bruised, broken, raped, molested, abused, forgotten, or betrayed, I got an invitation to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And he has called me to himself. Job 13:15 says, though he slay me, yet will I trust. Verse 16 says, he also shall be my salvation. When I am broken, he mends me. When I am blind, he leads me. When I am hungry, he feeds me. How do you get past your pain, you may ask? Turn it over to Jesus, and he will work it out. He supplies strength for the weak. He is available for the tempted and the tried. He sympathizes and he saves. He strengthens and he sustains. He guards and he guides. He heals the sick. He discharges the debtors. He delivers the captives. He defends the feeble. He blesses the young. He serves the unfortunate. He regards the aged. And he blesses the broken. You wonder how I know? Because I've had cancer. I've had COVID twice. I've had diabetes. I've gone through many trials and tribulations, and yet I'm still standing. The hardest thing that we have to do sometimes is forgiving someone who's not sorry. But it's yours. You deserve it. Let go and let God give you peace. You deserve peace after all the trouble, after the trials and the tribulations and the tests, after the hurt and the brokenness. You deserve peace. Now unto him that is able to keep you from falling, to present you faultless before the presence of his glory with exceeding joy, and upholds us even when we get mishandled. Let his strength be perfected in our weaknesses, as he uses our brokenness to reveal the much stronger us. I would encourage you, if there's someone that has done something to you, forgive them. Even if they never apologize, let it go. The Lord gave me a quote. Bitterness is like a lit match. The longer you hold it, the more likely you're going to hurt yourself. It's time to let go of those things that have been holding us bound in chains and shackles. I would encourage you all, turn it over to Jesus. They say that I've heard the saying that is the problems that we have are too big for us, but they're just right for him. He says, cast our cares upon him. No matter what it is you're going through, I encourage you to turn it over to Jesus, and he will make it all right.
Everybody stand up. I should have